So I'm delighted to be joined again by Julien Willems and Euan Campbell from the Society's Spirits team to catch up on what's coming out from members in the May Outturn. For those of you who were tuned in last month, you would have heard that Julien was on standby to become a new dad, and we're delighted to welcome the arrival of young Finlay. So I hope everything's going well, Julien. You're not too sleep deprived at the moment.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Yeah, no, all good, I suppose. You take the bad with the good. But yeah, it's a wild ride, but it's a delightful one.
Have you got a wee whiskey put away for Finlay's 21st yet?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail, but I actually bought a cask from him. So.
Oh, lucky boy.
That's all right, eh?
Yeah, that's quite a 21st gift coming his way. All right, we'll find out more about that another time. Lots to talk about for May. It's festival month, and that always means some really sensational releases from the Society. We'll talk about those in a moment or two. But just a really interesting mix of bottlings coming out this month. And Julien and Euan have kind of picked out some of their favourites or most interesting casks that caught their eye. Julien, let's start with the 41.159 Lean Mean Sherry Machine. Great name. So tell us about this one.
Yeah, so I think this one is a bit of a wink to the Speyside Festival, although it's not one of the festival bottlings. But we're going deep into sherry territory right here, with a really great combination of baking spices that come from the Spanish oak, and some really sweet depth, quite resinous from the PX, so Pedro Jimenez sherry seasoning that has been happening here. It's also a larger size of cask, so it allows you to get a bit of a different take on whiskey maturation. Usually what we see as a great majority is a 200-liter barrel or a 250-liter hogshead. Here you're talking 500-liter butt, so that is a bit of a different approach. But it also provides for a mellower, longer maturation.
Sounds magic. And we love a rare cask type at the Society, and it's all about the variety of offerings that we have for members. And Euan, the 9.265 all things dark and mystical certainly ticks the lesser spotted box, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. This one really stands out to me. We've got an Australian muscat cask, so very rare type of cask. This had to make the journey all the way from Australia to our warehouse near Glasgow. I remember receiving this batch and carrying out sensory on them, and they're just amazing, really heady, sweet dessert wine, lots of honey notes, stone fruit, just really elegant. And obviously, these casks we don't see very often coming from the other side of the world. Probably most likely to be used in the domestic Australian thing. So we're really lucky to get our hands on this one.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. And obviously we get more casks from some distilleries than others, but 77 we've not seen that many of over the years. But we've got cask 77.74 Darling Clementine coming out this month. So a bit of a lesser spotted one, Julien.
Yeah, indeed. So this is not a distillery we see very often these days, and let alone as a single malt or a single malt that's quite heavily sherried. In this case, you don't see this distillery very often. And I had to go back quite a bit in the bottling archives to find the previous ones. So yeah, there's not been that many since since 2017 or 2016. Right, so here it's again a deep and dried fruit whiskey, but here we're back into the hogshead, quite intense maturation with the sherry, and yeah, it's probably one of those you want to savor, and quite a sipper of a dram.
Yes, so it sounds like quite an elegant one, well worth looking at. Distillery 4 is a favourite for us, Euan. An interesting one coming out in May from this Orkney distillery. It's an STR cask, right? So shaved, toasted, and recharred. What does that bring to it?
Yeah, it's a great way to give a wine cask a new lease of life. So this will have been used for red wine for probably a maximum of 3 years, perhaps a little less. There's then about 3 millimeters is shaved off each stave individually before it undergoes a toasting treatment to create more flavors, and then a brief charring as well to give us the benefit of a char layer. And then this is really interesting as well. So this has been then re-seasoned with Pedro Jimenez wine, just to add, cram even more flavor into that cask. It will have been seasoned for at least 12 months with the PX wine as well. So cask number 4.367 is a cracking Orkney distillery with a wee wisp of peat smoke as well. And actually the subtlety that you get from a cask that has been used for wine and then re-seasoned really reminds me of some of the old school proprietary bottlings from this distillery. So just a lovely marriage of subtle smoke and then some sherry tones coming through, just adding some kind of bass guitar in the background. And then it's also worth mentioning, just while we're looking at this cask type, there is cask number 71.99 is in exactly the same cask type, but it's a very different spirit profile. So this is a Speyside unpeated, quite a kind of fruity, creamy distillate compared with that slightly more rugged Highland, lightly peated with the number 4. So that would be a really good pair to compare based on the cask type and how different spirits can interact with it.
Yeah, it sounds good. We're losing you a wee bit. You're coming and going a wee bit, Euan, but I think we're getting most of that. I'm just curious about the name G35. What is it? Japanese car or Norwegian cheese?
I think your guess is as good as mine there.
I thought you might have some insight into that one, because I have no idea what G35 Japanese car or Norwegian cheese means.
No, me neither. I guess so the Norwegian cheese that I'm thinking of, that stuff that's very like fudgy. What's that called? The stuff I'm talking about.
Getosht, probably massacring that pronunciation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it might be that kind of savoury, sweet fudginess that you get from that Norwegian cheese. Japanese car, could it be referring to kind of new leather smells of upholstery? I'm not I'm not sure, I'm afraid. I'm doing my best here.
Okay. But so this one is basically one of those very old malts from the Volks collection, since it's bottled at age 32. And what's really fascinating here is that we thought this was the unpeated variant of so we know that it's the unpeated variant of the spirit. However, to taste and to nose, this is definitely peated. So if you look at the cask, make up for this one. It's a refill sherry butt. Refill meaning there's probably been at least 2 fills of this cask before this whiskey was aged into it for 32 years. This could imply that the previous fills of that sherry butt were of a peated distillate, which could explain why it still tastes mildly peated, although the distillate itself is not peated in this case. Anyway, it's a bit of a mystery, but an absolutely delicious one. So if you manage to get your hands on this, you certainly will not be disappointed.
I'm sure.
I remember trying this one. It's absolutely brilliant. It's very kind of oily. You've got surprisingly active sherry cask for having been reused. So there's good colour in there, good dark fruits, but then some really oily kind of mechanics, overalls type of character there as well. So really special stuff.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much everything you would want from a dram of that age and make.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's 66.246 cigars, Sauterne, and sauteed sultanas, and I believe that's one of 3 Vaults Collection bottlings that will be coming out in May, at some point in May. So yeah, keep your eyes open for those spectacular Vaults Collection bottlings. Some non-scotch coming out, Euan, a Tennessee bourbon with an interesting maturation story to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So B5.6 is a bourbon whiskey produced in Tennessee, and it's got quite an interesting backstory, this cask. It was matured sort of half and half in America and Scotland. So 6 years old and pretty much three years in the US, and then 3 years over here in Scotland. So we quite often see with rums, when you've got like an element of tropical aging, it's always interesting to see what impact that different climate and type of maturation has had. And then, Scotland, I think, just allows it to mellow out a little bit in our different climate. So also the mash bill for this is 70% corn, 22% rye, and a wee bit of malted barley at 8%. So the corn just gives it this lovely kind of creamy sweetness. Rye, typically people say it gives kind of spices, and I also find it gives a little bit of herbal kind of character as well. So yeah, really interesting, matured in new charred oak for the full term as well. So I would highly recommend people give that a go.
And another interesting maturation, Julien, with the 72.120, feeling hot.
Yeah, as Euan was mentioning, you do see some tropical maturation for rum due to the climate of where the rum was produced. So here you're talking about whiskey that has spent 4 years in a bourbon barrel. After that, it's been transferred for 4 years in a Trinidad rum cask, which has probably seen that type of tropical maturation with its previous contents. And this one is a particularly interesting one to try with an open mind, and maybe a splash of lime juice, some ice, and a sprig of mint, if you want to sort of herald the summer early.
Yeah, for sure. And another Australian red wine cask, Euan, because we had the 9.265 with the Muscat, but this one, different kind of red wine cask for its maturation.
Yeah, incredibly different character to this one. So it's an ex-Cabernet Sauvignon hogshead, which I think tend to be larger than hogsheads that we talk about in whiskey terms that are recoopered from barrels. So they, a standard whiskey hogshead is about 250 litres. I think these wine ones are about 300. So bit more headspace in there, which is quite interesting for this cask 80.45. We moved the whiskey from a Scotch 250 litre hoggy into this larger Cabernet Sauvignon. So I guess the spirit has a bit more time to breathe. It has a bit more oxygen in the top of the cask there. Also, absolutely crazy colour, as people might expect from using a red wine cask. So very, very dark, really red. And the flavours are, basically, I think it might be psychological from seeing the colour, but there's a lot of red berry, kind of cranberry, jammy intensity for this one. So about 3 years in the Australian red wine hogshead after 7 in bourbon. Really interesting.
Yeah, that's cask 80.45, a circus of oddities. And a lot of people will be pleased to see a new bottling first for a long time from a favourite for many people, from 121, Distillery 121, and it's cask number 104 from there. First time we've seen one from this island for a while, Euan.
Yes, I think, again, I was, like Julien said, I was digging into the bottle archives trying to figure out when the last one came out, which I think was around 2018. One that we... Sorry, my phone's going. I guess you can edit that out.
No, we'll just leave that in.
Right, okay, nice one. It shows the human side. Hang on. I had to dig into the bottling records for this one to try and figure out when we last saw a release from 121, and I think it was around 2018. So a very welcome return for this distillery, and we think we should see a lot more of these starting to come on stream, because I remember filling this cask in 2014. This is one of the really early ones from our most recent fillings program that kicked off towards the end of 2014. So it's amazing for me to see, something that you remember commissioning the filling of and then getting to see it coming through as 8-year-old mature, delicious whiskey. So the bourbon cask really shines through with this one. The spirit is lovely and fruity. There's maybe some kind of white chocolate notes in there. And then it also does have this coastal salty balanced out with some stewed apple kind of flavors as well.
Very nice. And Julien, a possible pairing from, I guess, pretty similar, same kind of cask, but similar spirit types. We've got Welsh whiskey 128.26 and Scotch 112.117. What makes you think these would pair up in an interesting way?
That's one of those things that I really like to compare, is when you have some stills that are not really conforming to the standard Scotch whiskey mold, although you have some pretty famous distilleries using the kind of stills we're talking about for 112 here. They're not often seen. And if you compare this to this, let's go back to the basics here. It's a cask that is still considered sort of a pot still, but does have a very straight neck, which it makes the vapors the lighter vapors go up a lot more through the column, and it allows you to filter out just what you need in the lighter compounds, which makes for a very high ABV, very fruity and very clean distillate if you use it like it is used for 112 and 128. I believe that for 128, for instance, the distillation strength is about 92% ABV. It's not casked at that level, obviously, but so in both cases, to just cut to the chase here, you get very light, fruity, and intense distillates that come from two distilleries very, very far apart. But it's very fun to see that there is still some sort of kinship between them and the character of the spirit. So that's one you just want to try. And you can see that the profiles are not too dissimilar either. You have a light and delicate on one side and a young and sprightly on the other side, which means that you do have quite a bit of spirit influence. The cask is there, but it's not the most prominent feature.
Yeah, very interesting. And we mentioned at the start that May obviously is festival month, and we've got we've got two kind of lots of releases. We've spoken, Euan, already for separate information about the small batch releases that are coming out. We've got 7 separate bottlings that are being released in May. And also single cask releases to celebrate festival season. So, I mean, I guess the short way to put it is there's something for everyone there this month with the festival releases.
Absolutely, there's a lot of variety here. We've got regional representation all round. We've got bourbon, sherry casks, different oak types, Spanish, American, Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez. We've got a highly experimental batch that was a custom distillation that we helped with at Distillery 156. So that is really worth checking out, the Lowland small batch in number 4 char, 24-month air-seasoned American oak with toasted heads. So that was new oak casks that we commissioned from a cooperage in America. And then we've also got 4 single cask releases from Speyside, Islay, and Campbelltown, again across a range of different cask types.
Yeah, brilliant selection. And looking forward to trying the G16 small batch release, because I remember being there that day where you were actually lifting some sacks of grains and were heavily involved in the distillation itself. 2016, I think it was.
Yeah, time flies. I remember that well. In fact, I saw a photograph from there the other day, and my beard must have been about double the length. I don't ever remember having quite so scraggly a beard, but hey, I did.
yeah, some good shots. We need to dig them out. I think your hair was a bit longer as well. But yeah, 2016. So lovely to see that coming out. Desperate to try it. But yeah, fantastic selection of small batch releases, which, as you say, are in a greater volume, and anything from I think just over 1,000 to just over 2,000 bottles of each of those, plus some spectacular single cask bottlings coming members' way in May as well. So yeah, lots going on, lots of variety and lots to choose from. So thanks again, gents, for your insights. Always very useful and valuable and much appreciated. And look forward to catching up for a dram with some of these May whiskies.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.